Hello YouTube, it's Fine here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we are doing another novel review. Today we are reviewing Brightblade by Cajiao. And this one has been a long time coming. I think he gave this to me about a year ago. I'm not exactly sure, but it has been quite a bit of time. So Jess, man, thank you for the book. I do apologize this took so long to get out, but I have finally finished it and I did quite like it. So this is published by MAH Publishing according to Amazon. I assume that that's a small publishing group that probably focuses on LitRPG stuff, or it might actually be his own company. I'm not too sure, but either way, it is published through Amazon by somebody, some company that is probably quite small. The demographic here is adult. I guess a teenager can read this and enjoy it, but I would not recommend that because there are adult themes and topics here. So if you're a teenager, get your parents' permission or just kind of sneak it. I don't know, whatever you want to do. It's not really my problem, but the demographic here is definitely adult. The kind of material that is prevalent is quite mature. So there you go. Now the genres here are, as far as I can tell, LitRPG. This is a LitRPG adventure, so that's a given. But in terms of what type of LitRPG or what sort of kind of subgenres it falls under, fantasy is the clear one. There's this kind of element of portal fantasy as well. He gets transported into another world. And then within the type of RPG elements, like I don't know what type of video game style it would fit under. It's like it definitely has this idea of like tower climbing and tower defense kind of video games where he has to like scale the tower and kind of conquer the tower. But that's not like the only thing that exists, right? There's also this idea of like a Civ type kind of game where you have to conquer the lands. There's also this kind of vibe of a kind of taking quests and kind of saving the world and saving people and kind of developing your character, of course. And so there's quite a few different kind of like RPG video game genres that fall under this book, or that this book falls under. So it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of stuff here. So there should be a little bit of something for everyone in this book. This does not currently have an adaptation, obviously. But if it ever got around to having an adaptation, I would like it as a TV show. Maybe not a live action one. It might be very difficult to do, but it definitely animated. Or if he wants to go the way, what's it called? Michael Scott Earl went, he could do like a visual novel type of thing. Those are pretty interesting. I don't know. Michael Scott Earls is kind of cool. So yeah. Now the premise here is basically that this dude, his name is Jax, and he's a very kind of typical kind of down on his luck kind of bro dude kind of guy, gets abducted by this secret organization slash monster group, and he gets told that he has a chance to find his brother who went missing 5 years prior to the start of the book. And then he gets trained for a mystical gladiatorial match, and then he gains the ability to enter the Underverse, which is this other world kind of place. And he gains the ability not because he couldn't before, but rather because he won the match, kind of. And then he has to enter the Underverse and set up a stronghold for the people that abducted him. So there's quite a bit of stuff here to go over. And yeah, I did enjoy it. Generally, my thoughts are that this is a positive read. It did take me a long time. However, it took me a long time because for whatever reason, I wasn't like super, not engaged. I was engaged with the book, but like I would put it down and not need the, like not have the compulsion to pick it up again. Not because I didn't like it, but because I had other stuff going on or was interested in other things at the time. And so I don't think that it was in any way bad. It was just kind of like not vibing with me the same way some other books were at the time. And so that made me kind of take forever. But then I sat down, pushed through it a little bit, and eventually I did get hooked, and I read it and finished it, and here we are. So yeah, plotline wise, I think this is good. It goes through quite a bit of different things. We could kind of say these are growing pains because the book is trying to find out what it is, and as it kind of gets to the Underverse, it goes through some kind of evolutions and changes into the Underverse, right? So we start with this introduction, which is kind of you kind of feel like it's going to be a supernatural kind of like urban fantasy type of setting, because it starts in a bar or a dance club or something, and we get this character having these kind of like weird visions / voices in his head, but it's all based around the fact that you want to introduce this character to the audience, right? And then you read through that, then he gets in the hospital, and then he gets abducted by these kind of alien dudes. Well, they're not really aliens. I mean, I guess they are aliens, but they're more like monsters from the Underverse who are also kind of like very rich people. And so you kind of feel like this is kind of a like action series in the Mission Impossible / James Bond kind of way. And then it turns into this grind fest once we get kind of the idea that, this character has to fight in a match to go into the Underverse, and that's the end goal. But before he can do that, and because it kind of aligns with his personal goals, he's getting to go there, he needs to grind and to become like a proficient fighter, and he also wants to find his brother, who happened to also do this 5 years beforehand, right? But his brother, like the plot line with his brother ends up coming and going. Like it's always there, it's underlying as an important aspect of Jax's character, but he kind of forgets about it throughout the series when other things are going on. He doesn't really reiterate the fact that he needs to find his brother enough for you to think that he really cares that much, because he kind of gets sidetracked very easily. And then once they get into the gladiatorial kind of thing, you think it's going to be a battle royale situation. And then after that happens and he gets into the Underverse, it's kind of just like a survival kind of fight the evil monster and conquer the tower kind of thing. And that's kind of where it ends. It ends with that kind of point in mind. The tower has been successfully kind of captured, and he's moving on to greater battles with the surrounding bad guys. And I guess I spoiled something there, but there's quite a lot of stuff to read. This book is quite dense. There's a lot of stuff going on. So my spoilers are like not that important, because the context of the book is actually quite a lot more interesting than how I described it. So I don't really feel too bad about spoiling things. However, I do apologize if the watchers don't enjoy that. So, yeah, quite good. The fights are very nice. They feel very cinematic. And the kind of general vibe of the book, the way it's written and the way it's set up, does feel like it's supposed to be some sort of movie. Like just the structure of how things are going, it feels like the introduction, fade to black, credits, or the title card, and then you get the actual series, or like not the actual series, sorry, the proper film aspect, and then the grind fest is like a montage. And he gets to the Royale thing, and then he battles it, and then he gets into the verse, and then from there he is kind of in the second and third act, and then the resolution that leads up into the next movie kind of thing. So I do feel that this was quite cinematic. The vibe of the book was quite good. The way it was written was quite good. Just Cajiao is actually quite good at writing. His prose isn't complex at all, which is not a bad thing. Like I said that, and most people would kind of find that to be a negative thing, but I don't. I don't really like overtly flowery language, and Just Cajiao really balances that out. He does have elements of in times when his language gets a little bit more complex and more interesting. But generally, it's quite straightforward, very kind of Brandon Sanderson-esque, where it's just like, here are the facts, here's the information, enjoy it. There's quite a bit of lore to back up the kind of vibe and kind of the feel of the story. So overall, I think the plot line and the way everything develops is quite good. Characters-wise, you don't really have that many that are important. Basically, Jax is the only major character. He's kind of a good guy with anger issues, and his whole kind of thing is that he's kind of stupid. But not in like the shonen protagonist kind of way, more like he just does things, but because he doesn't think them through, he ends up in a worse situation all the time. And this is just compounded with his anger issues. But we do get to see that he is relatively intelligent when it matters, right? And then we have Wes, who is the guy that worked for the abductors that helped out Jax, who also kind of ended up being his friend. He's not really that important. He's kind of a character that's there to establish Jax's characteristics as an individual more than he is an actual character. Like, he's a plot device, right? And the magic teacher lady, who happens to be Chinese, I think, also is kind of in that model as well. I can't remember her name, and I don't want to say a name off the top of my head because I'm very likely to be wrong. So there you go. Then we have some mythical creatures. Once we're in the Underverse, we have elves and dwarves and, you know, spider monsters and shit. But the kind of important ones are Oracle, Seneschal, and Hephaestus, who happen to be wisps, aka they're little like dungeon fairies, essentially. Oracle is female, and she happens to be kind of this kind of the innuendo character, the female companion to our hero, and also the kind of exposition dump all in one, which is actually quite good. It functions very nicely. I like her as a character a lot. She brings a good amount of comedy. She brings a good amount of levity. She also brings a lot of exposition. And because, you know, she kind of gets these interesting ideas, she ends up being kind of a like the sexy character as well, which is kind of interesting. Seneschal and Hephaestus are kind of not as funny, but they do provide exposition, and they're kind of part of the tower in a way that is quite important. We also have a lot of other characters, like we have Orin the dwarf, Aaron the elf, I think it was. He's like a kid. And then we have a bunch of, you know, other secondary characters that aren't really that important, but that play some part here and there. The bad guys here are the Baron and the Spore Mother, which are kind of interesting. The Baron is quite a big deal, I guess, but he also doesn't play a part very often, but when he does, he's like the big imposing bad guy. Kind of reminds me of the Kingpin from Spider-Man, which is kind of funny, but I think he's a lot more kind of grotesque. But yeah, good characters. Jax is interesting, and Oracle in his relationship is quite good. There's also Bob, the reincarnated skeleton guy. He's kind of interesting. I like him because he has this kind of like silent but meaningful attitude to him, because he's a monster, but he also has this kind of charisma to him, which is kind of interesting. I think Jess really made a very good character with Bob, which is kind of funny because Bob is like the most insignificant character, but I like him a lot. So yeah, world building wise, there's a lot of generic stuff here, but each of the generic things compounds into something that is quite good, quite interesting. So we have a generic power system. Our character has a character sheet. He opens the character sheet to check things, and he has stats, and he has ways in which he can evolve and grow and kind of develop skills and kind of stuff like that. And he does this periodically. He has, like actual physical stats that affect his body, and then metaphysical stats that affect his soul, his mind, and his intelligence and stuff like that. He can physically augment his physical stats and kind of work out his body in order to upgrade them, but he cannot really do that with his mental stats, his metaphysical stats, and so he has to use his points that he gets every level in order to level those up. And he kind of has to have a build, and he has to kind of figure out if he likes to min-max or not. You know, a lot of general video game-esque system kind of stuff here. The magic in the world is also generally quite generic in terms of science fiction and fantasy. well, mostly fantasy. But it is also kind of interesting, and the mishmashing of all of these things actually is quite compelling. It actually ends up being quite cool, and we do get to see that this world, the Underverse, has a huge amount of lore and kind of backstory to it that we really are not privy to because we only care about the bits that are important to our character Jax, right? So there's a lot to find out, and I'm sure that there's quite a bit more to see in the the future of the books, right? So yeah, the kind of evil creatures aren't very generic either. There's kind of this like evil spider lady, which I guess is kind of generic, but it's very interesting, and the Spore Mother is very, very scary and very interesting. I like it. Lots of fantasy races of all different types. Lots of fantasy creatures and constructs and all of that. So there's a lot of stuff here in terms of world building. Now, fan service wise, or adult content wise, there is some adult material. Most of it is fade to black or very briefly explained and then moved on from. This isn't really like a Hamlet story that kind of really focuses on that. Or one of those like female bodice rippers that are kind of interesting that everyone kind of like sees at grocery stores all the time. But there is a lot of innuendo. There's quite a bit of gore and stuff like that, which is its own type of fan service in a way. I mean, a lot of people think that, very gory films are very interesting, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, there's definitely adult material here. If you're not comfortable with that, really don't check this out. This might not be for you. But generally, I think that the story is good enough that if you're a little bit uncomfortable with those aspects, you really shouldn't have any problems with them anyways, because the story will kind of pull you through those little awkward bits while you get over the fan servicey aspects. So yeah, rating wise is a 4 out of 5. It's actually quite enjoyable. The fights are very cool, very dynamic. The lore is very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of this. When I'll read more of it is kind of up in the air. I don't really know. I think this is a series that for me personally would be something that I would read when I'm in a reading slump, when I don't really have the desire to read anything else, because this would be kind of like interesting. There's kind of enough action in a way that is kind of easy to read, but also kind of very interesting and dynamic to kind of get me out of not wanting to read and kind of get me back into reading. So it's kind of interesting like that. But yeah, I definitely recommend this title. I think that it's quite good. Like I said, the coolest part is actually the fights. The way Cajiao writes fights is very, very good. I do like it a lot. It's very nicely done. And in terms of similar titles, Tower Climbers and The Five Trials, which I've done reviews on, would be kind of similar. Tower Climbers specifically is more related in the way that the world is a lot darker than it looks, and that there's this element of towers existing. And The Five Trials is more similar in the kind of messed up portal fantasy aspect. So yeah, that's all I have for you guys. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. I really do appreciate you guys watching this video, and thank you, Jess, for the book. I do appreciate that as well. If you guys like what I do and want to support me, I do have a coffee. I just made it, so that's why I'm pushing it this week. I'll probably stop mentioning it really soon, but I do have it. It's down in the description if you guys want, and of course check out Jess's links down in the description as well. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, like I said, and see you guys later.